government issue profile. Check on your messages, getting spied on by the CEI. Well, who's out there to ruin your life? Got no privacy, you got no peace of mind. You're riled up, type a censored word and delete it off the face of the map. God gave you an energy, but you waste it on this lie you see, and it's nothing but empty internet crap. Love follows every man who deletes their followers. So they trap you under pressure, but you're not brave enough, I betcha, to leave the whole thing and be yourself again. Suffering children who thought they'd have a voice. Who are these mother demons affecting you for no good reason? Bioweapon, racism, death masks. God gave you an energy, but you waste it on this lie you see, and it's nothing but empty internet crap. Their followers, and they trap you under pressure, but you're not brave enough, I betcha, to leave this whole thing and be yourself again.
Pornography is hard to see, takes guts to walk the truth. Being who you are affects us all. No one suffers in a corner like they'd like to tell themselves. Love is a lie transmitted through small talk, a big compressed alien lore. You only matter if you can tell a good story, or what you could give them what they want. What is a computer nice mind on your friend? You never met one of them. Which one you gonna go up to and talk to in public? You're not gonna hold me back, I'm gonna murder you, idiot! Rip them it away for another day. Can you feel today? Trouble you never learn.
I don't Don't you worry about another's endeavors. Follow the stream, you will stream. Are you getting caught just yet? Never turn your back on police. Never know where who might own them.
How's it going? Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to meet with you here once again. I have a really fun story to start us off with, and I'm going to be kind of speed reading tonight because I do have to leave a little bit before 7 so that Andy and I can join our marriage group. The super cool story I want to introduce is the conjoined twin babies, Amy Lynn and Jamie Lynn, who shared a stomach and liver, were separated after a painstaking 11-hour historic surgery. And I cannot tell you how delighted I am every single time a set of conjoined twins is successfully separated. It is the coolest thing in the world that this is something that we are able to do. There are crazy words in here, so bear with me. The pair were omphalagus twins, OMPHALOPAGUS twins joined at the abdomen and sharing an organ. Born prematurely in October, they were attached to the stomach with one liver. It was Cook Children's Medical Center's first time performing separation surgery. Wow, amazing. I'm sure there are tons and tons of different kinds of conjoined twins, so they have a bunch of different weird, crazy names I've never heard before. Even though I've seen a lot of these medical terms, never these ones, but that's awesome. Okay, so let's see what they did. Step 1, surgeons conducted a detailed assessment of the twins, studying scans of their joined abdomen and shared liver, so they knew beforehand that they were sharing an organ. Then they built models of the girls to map out potential surgery outcomes and rehearse their movements. So it literally looks like they just taped baby dolls together to see what would happen if they were to separate them. That's crazy. That's actually really funny. So considering that this hospital had never done a surgery like this before, that doesn't really surprise me. Good for them for rising to the occasion. Step 3, a team of 25 medics surgically separated the girls during a delicate procedure using precision techniques, and then surgeons split into 2 teams to separate, I can't read this. Yeah, okay, to separately close up each girl's wounds. That is crazy. Holy cow. These are such cute little girls too. They're adorable. Amy Lynn and Jamie Lynn, how cute. Oh, they're so happy to be able to sleep in their own cribs for the first time. It was both lead surgeon Dr. Jose Iglesias and the medical center's first time performing the surgery. Oh my gosh, no pressure. The procedure took months of planning, and Dr. Iglesias and his team created prosthetic versions of the twins to map out exactly how they would do the operation. The surgeons painted on one of the twins' toenails purple and the other's green, and then different surgeons were allocated to either twin and wore corresponding colored scrub caps. That's very smart. Team Amy Lynn wore green hats, while Team Jamie Lynn wore purple hats. Jamie Lynn and Amy Lynn were I can't read this word. Omphalophagus, there we go, twins, meaning they were joined at the abdomen and share one or more internal organs. Around 10% of conjoined babies are that word, according to the NIH, but they have the best chance of surviving after successful surgery. The girls were attached from the lower part of the breastbone to the belly button and shared a liver. 2 anesthesiologists, 4 pediatric surgeons, 2 plastic surgeons, and 16 other clinical professionals worked together to separate the twins. They split up the shared liver and then closed up the wounds. Yeah, if I recall correctly, liver is one of the few organs that can regenerate itself. So if they take like a part of it, they can transplant it into somebody else, and that first person will regrow it. You guys are welcome to fact check me on this. It's been a while since I talked about any of this stuff, but this is such a neat development. I love the idea of these girls being able to live independently. I think that's awesome. So that is the good news that I wanted to start us off with this evening. I just thought it was really fun. I love stories like that, and it's nice to have some good news in the world. Sometimes it seems like everything's only bad news. So we are going to hop right into the Washington Post's analysis of the McCarthy shenanigans this morning. Opinion: McCarthy is right to kick Omar, Schiff, and Swalwell off committees. This is from Mark Tyson. This is from yesterday. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, is 100% right to move to kick Representative Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee and remove Reps Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell from the House Intelligence Committee. Omar is an anti-Semite who has no business serving on a committee that helps set U.S. policy toward Israel. That's fair. And Schiff and Swalwell are conspiracy theorists who abused their positions on the Intelligence Committee to falsely claim they had seen secret evidence that President Donald Trump conspired with Russia to steal the 2016 election, which was a lie. Neither deserve access to our nation's secrets. Omar's record of virulent anti-Semitic remarks is disqualifying. In March 2019, she declared politicians who support Israel push for allegiance to a foreign country, accusing Israel supporters in Congress of dual loyalty, which then Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Eliot L. Engel correctly called a vile anti-Semitic slur. But then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi allowed her to remain on that committee. A few months later, Omar introduced a resolution in Congress comparing the boycott of Israel to boycotting Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Again, Democrats did nothing. In September 2021, Omar and her anti-Israel allies used a potential government shutdown to force Pelosi to remove $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system from an emergency spending bill. The Iron Dome is a purely defensive system that protects civilians from Hamas rockets, which means Omar wanted to shut down the government to let terrorists indiscriminately kill Jews. There's not really another motivation there. Democratic leaders had to arrange a separate vote to approve Iron Dome funding. Again, there were no consequences. Then in June 2021, Omar compared the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. What? Forcing House Democratic leaders to issue a joint statement declaring drawing false equivalencies between democracies like the U.S. and Israel and groups that engage in terrorism like Hamas and the Taliban foment prejudice. But instead of punishing Omar, Pelosi praised her as a valued member of the caucus, because of course she did. Valued member? Omar has said U.S. support for Israel is all about the Benjamins, insinuating that Jews buy American influence. She shared an anti-Israel cartoon on social media that was drawn by a second-place winner of Iran's Holocaust denial cartoon contest. She supports the anti-Semitic BDS movement, which seeks the economic destruction of Israel. While giving Omar a pass, Pelosi made a show of stripping Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments. Now McCarthy is using that precedent to do what Pelosi should have done years ago and strip Omar of her committee assignments. He is also right to remove Schiff and Swalwell, who misled Americans into believing they had seen secret evidence that Trump conspired with Russia when no such evidence existed. Schiff repeatedly claimed his intelligence committee had unearthed plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy. On Meet the Press, he declared, "I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now," and assured ABC News that Trump's Russia conspiracy is of a size and scope probably beyond Watergate, because of course he did. A few months later, Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller announced the evidence did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. That's not all. Schiff actively spread the lie that disclosure of compromising information on Hunter Biden's laptop was part of a Russian information operation. Clearly, he told CNN, the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin. They weren't. Swalwell has been even more irresponsible. In an interview with MSNBC, he was asked by host Chris Matthews, "Do you believe the president right now had been an agent of the Russians?" He replied, "Yes, I think there's more evidence that he is." Matthews cut in and asked, "Agent?" Swalwell continued, "Yes, and I think all the arrows point in that direction. I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that he's not." An incredulous Matthews pressed him yet again. "An agent? Like in the 1940s, where you had the people who were Reds, to use an old term, like that? In other words, working for a foreign power?" Swalwell replied, "He's working on behalf of the Russians, yes." When CNN questioned this outrageous claim, Swalwell declared he certainly acts on Russia's behalf, and it's a claim from someone who also worked as a prosecutor for 7 years and had the responsibility of looking at evidence and putting it before a jury. Ironically, while Swalwell was pushing the theory that Trump was an agent of a hostile foreign power, he had been informed by the FBI that he, Swalwell, had had a relationship with a suspected agent of a hostile foreign power, alleged Chinese spy Christine Fong. When Representative Stephen King wondered publicly in 2019 why terms such as white nationalist and white supremacist has suddenly become offensive, Republicans stripped him of his committee assignments. But Democrats did not police their own ranks in the same way. Now, Republicans will do it for them. Well, that is a pretty incisive piece from the Washington Post. Good for them for actually publishing that. I'm shocked that they did. As we typically do, we have the archived version in the links in the description below this video. I'm going to move on now to the educational side of things because the school board members have been up to no good. This one is coming out of Iowa. Iowa school board member gets ripped for saying public education is not to teach kids what parents want. The new school board member's Facebook post drew much ire, prompting calls for her resignation. This isn't her, I don't think. An Iowa school board member posted on Facebook on Tuesday that public education is not to teach kids what parents want, but rather what the community needs. Quote, the purpose of public education is not to teach kids what parents want, it is to teach them what society needs them to know. The client is not the parent, but the community. Linn-Mar school board member Rachel Wall posted. Wow, okay, let me stop right there and tell you guys that the whole thrust of this particular little short story here is to tell you to homeschool your children. We're going to look at the stats on that here at the end of this. The Facebook post garnered much pushback in the comment section. The post received over 100 comments. Resign now, humbly, you absolutely know you're breaking Iowa code, one user responded with terrible grammar, but that's fine, it's Facebook. Thank God Kim Reynolds now signed the law where parents have the freedom to use their money to send their kids to the school they choose. Hopefully schools like Linn-Mar will lose kids in droves, another said. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds speaks during a news conference at Iowa Spring Manufacturing Wednesday, October 22nd in Adel, Iowa. Reynolds will deliver the Republican response to President Biden's State of the Union address on March 1st, GOP congressional leaders announced Tuesday. She recently passed legislation making it so that kids and parents in her state are able to use that money that would have gone to the tax fund for public schools to go to whatever schools they so choose, which is probably the best use of taxpayer dollars that I've ever seen. The question I have is, why do you think society needs our kids to know the liberal woke agenda? Linn-Mar spends way too much time and resources on the LGBTQ agenda while ignoring more pertinent issues. Shame on you for asserting that parents don't know what their kids need, one person posted. You are nothing more than an activist pushing your ideology on children. You took this right off your buddy Molly Donahue's page. Resign, another commenter noted. Wall added at the top of the post after it garnered pushback in the comment section. This post has garnered much ire, and though I thought the sentiment was clear, it's obvious that's not the case. Please allow me to clarify. Oh, good. Please do so. This post doesn't say that parents don't matter or that students don't matter. It doesn't say parents shouldn't be involved or that students shouldn't be our focus. What it says is that public education is an ecosystem. So literally all she's doing there is just choosing a different buzzword to try to get people off her back. Absolute nonsense. She deserves to be reamed. I'm very glad that Iowa has chosen to put school choice first and foremost. We're going to pop over here next to California. California teacher helps students change names and pronouns without parents' knowledge. Delightful. Who would have thought that this person would have been leading kids astray and reassigning them different pronouns than those they were born with? This person, I never would have guessed. That's so crazy. You should never judge a book by its cover, right? A California high school teacher has boldly confessed that she helps students change their gender identity without their parents' knowledge. My job, which is a public service, is to protect kids, Olivia Garrison told the New York Times about helping students socially transition at school. Yes, this was in the article that we read the other day. We just didn't get all the way to the bottom. She says sometimes they need protection from their own parents. Social transition describes the process in which a person adopts the name and pronouns that align with their gender identity rather than the gender they were at birth. Harrison, who is non-binary, Garrison, as in Mr. Garrison, teaches history at Del Oro High School in Bakersfield. I'm sure she teaches nothing but true history. They previously posted on TikTok about the decorations in their queer safe space classroom, including a bright Love Wins flag. One of Garrison's former students, Clementine Morales, told The Times about coming out as non-binary at school when it felt uncomfortable to do so at home. I had to look for parental figures and other people who were not my parents, Morales, now 19, says of the process. But the issue has become a hot-button issue for parents under President Biden and his administration's proposed Title IX reforms, which would expand regulations combating sex-based discrimination in schools to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Critics have argued that reforms could overhaul the definition of gender in schools and be used as a weapon to keep parents in the dark. One of the chat Comments says LMAO, it's Mrs. Garrison. Yes, entirely. In fact, if I recall correctly from the piece that we read the other day, it's actually Mix Garrison, MX. So it makes even less sense. And we are truly living in an episode of South Park. One of the realities of the controversial policy has even outraged liberal parents like Jessica Bradshaw of Southern California. The mother told The Times that she learned her 15-year-old social transition after reading their preferred name on their worksheet. There was never any word from anyone to let us know that on paper, and in the classroom, our daughter was now our son. It felt like a parenting stab in the back from the school system. It should have been a decision we made as a family. Current high school district where Garrison teaches even boasts a flyer on its website that allows students to change their preferred name and gender marker without a parent's signature. In addition to name changes and new pronouns, the process can include physical alterations like wardrobe and hairstyle. Neither Garrison nor Delaware High School replied to the post request for comment. Dr. Erica Anderson, a psychologist who has helped hundreds of young people transition, is among those fighting the movement. Anderson, who is transgender, filed an amicus brief in support of parents in a Maryland lawsuit claiming the district's policy violates their rights, The Times reported. Good for Anderson. Maryland, like California and New Jersey, officially advises teachers and administrators not to disclose a student's social transition to their parents or guardian without permission from the student themselves, according to the publication. Despite admitting that she'd balked at siding with the conservative law group representing the parents, she wrote in the brief that transitioning socially is a major and potentially life-altering decision that requires parental involvement for many reasons. Other groups, however, advocate that the importance of a young person's autonomy to transition safely and privately without risking the consequences of coming out in an unsupportive family. I just have to stop and say that in our society, it blows my mind. We live in such an upside down time. Women are considered incapable of consenting to any form of physical relation with a gentleman if they have imbibed even one drink. They can say the next day, "Oh my gosh, I regret this. It was probably non-consensual." You know how it is. But a child, including a 3-year-old child, and we are being told before a child is even born, which is functionally incompatible with their idea that they're not really babies before they're born. They're just clumps of cells that you can pull out and throw away at your own whim. A child can decide their own gender, and even unborn babies may exhibit transgender tendencies. So, fully grown woman, incapable of making her own decision. 3-year-old child, fully capable of making their own decisions about their own life and life-altering changes. And at the end of the day, to me, this just strikes me as predatory behavior. This doesn't look like anything positive. It just looks like crazy people like this who decide they want to step in and cause a chaos and dismantle, they would probably tell you, dismantle the nuclear family because whatever reason. They have nothing good to replace it with. They're just going to destroy it, which I honestly believe is a sure sign of evil. I think that evil does nothing but destroy, and this ideology definitely qualifies as that because they have nothing to replace it with. These people will tell you that they are too nervous to order a pizza on the phone and too nervous to call and schedule their own dental appointments. But they will also tell you exactly how they are going to uproot the system and make everything better. In fact, let me see if I can find this real fast. I'm not convinced I can because it's very difficult to navigate Instagram on the computer if you don't sign in, which I can't because it's irritating and I always forget my password. Oh, no, I can't see it. No. All right. Oh, well, we tried. We'll hop on to the next thing that is also related. Teachers, the article says say, but I'm going to say whine. Teachers whine parents and laws are changing how they teach race and gender. Not fair. Let's read this. It's going to be great. Teachers are changing their lessons amid increasing scrutiny from parents and a raft of state laws and school policies that circumscribe lessons on race and gender, according to one of the first nationally representative studies of the subject. A report published by the RAND Corporation on Wednesday found that of a nationally representative sample of 8,000 teachers, 1/4 said they had revised their instructional materials or teaching practices to limit or exclude discussion of race and gender. Good. The report also found that some teachers were more likely than others to alter their lesson plans, including teachers of color, that is black teachers, high school teachers, and educators in suburban school districts. And the report found that teachers are feeling direct pressure from parents to shift their teaching habits. Good. Notwithstanding the spate of restrictive laws and policies, teachers most commonly pointed to parents and families as a source of limitations they experienced. Wow, so teachers are literally setting themselves up in direct opposition to families and parents. That's wild. That's wild. And you know what my conclusion is after all this? You know what I'm going to tell you to do? Homeschool your children. The findings draw on data gathered during the latest American Instructional Resources Survey, which RAND has administered each spring since 2019. In last year's iteration, they surveyed 8,000 educators teaching English, math, and science, as well as analyzed 1,500 open-ended responses from teachers. Our data suggests that limitations placed on how teachers can address contentious topics may be leading to consequences for teachers' working conditions and for student learning, the report states. Good. Teachers described working in conditions filled with worry, anxiety, and even fear. Oh gosh, hey, you know what? If they weren't teaching critical race theory, maybe they wouldn't be afraid. Although I don't believe that any of them actually feel afraid. I believe that they saw their opportunity to complain about the people they view as their opposition, that is, families and parents, because these people view your children as widgets of the state, as belonging to the state. And the more I read about this kind of stuff, the more I completely agree with libertarians on this point. Certainly not on everything. There is no reason for the state to have any place teaching your child anything at all. You should be the one teaching them everything they know. If you choose to hand over your kid to the state for 8 hours a day, honestly, I don't really think that you have a leg to stand on if you're going to criticize them. But that's not to say that you shouldn't be involved. If you must send your child to a state school, it is your moral obligation as a parent to be on these teachers' backs 24/7. You should be on the school board. You should be talking to the principal. You should be calling the teachers. You should be emailing them. You should be involved in every single feature of your child's education, because otherwise you're literally handing them to the state to indoctrinate at will. I personally, you can probably tell, have a huge issue with that. It's a moral issue. It is not the state's responsibility to raise your child. It is yours. You are given this child. If you believe in God, God gave you that child. If you believe in fate, fate brought you that child. That child is yours for a reason, and that reason is to teach them everything that you know, and the state does nothing but interfere with that. As you can see from this, teachers hate you. Laws limiting instructions on race, racism, and history made up 28% of the total. 14 such pieces of legislation have passed in at least 18 states. Good. Laws circumscribing instructions on gender identity, sexuality, and issues accounted for 23% of the total, with 15 such laws having passed in 8 states. Yes, those are rookie numbers. We got to pump those numbers up in 2023. At the same time, individual school districts have begun passing policies restricting education on similar topics. Yes, good. They should. If they want to retain students in the face of school choice laws being passed, this is exactly what they need to do. Meanwhile, U.S. adults are losing their confidence in the public school system. Oh my gosh, why do you think that is? A Gallup poll this month found that Americans' belief in grade school teachers' honesty had dropped to an all-time low, with a July poll finding that just 28% of Americans have substantial confidence in public schools, the second lowest this number has fallen since Gallup began asking about this topic in 1973. Teachers surveyed shared details on how they're changing their styles of instruction. Some said they're selecting different textbooks or for math and science. Teachers different sample data sets. In both cases, they're omitting anything that might be considered controversial or potentially offensive, the report stated. No. All you need to do to get around this is just tell the truth without any kind of bias behind it and with no ideological network around it. They described feeling greater hesitancy about exposing students to the notion of same-sex marriage and different kinds of family structures. Okay. As well as hanging LGBTQ pride flags or using instructional content that featured characters who identify as LGBTQ. You can't hang a Christian flag in your classroom, if I understand correctly, but you sure can raise the Pride Progress flag over your classroom. It is a state religion at this point. You will not convince me otherwise. It's just, I am so glad that teachers find this upsetting. I'm glad that they're changing their policies and their strategies, and I'm glad that they feel pressure from the parents of whom they make a huge mockery. Teachers who live and work in states with restrictive laws were more likely to report altering their curriculum and reteaching than teachers who live in states without such laws. Duh. So they're only doing this because this is what they're required to do, not because they have any kind of morals or conscience or actually care about their kids or their parents. So let's look at the number of kids who are being homeschooled. This is from the Financial Times, which I don't usually use because this author is almost never vetted, but I appreciated what this person had to say. The surprising COVID legacy for America's homeschoolers. While most children are back to their old routines, 3.7 million U.S. households are still teaching their kids at home. They show a picture of this Black family. Looks like they're having study time at home. It was mid-morning, midweek, and midwinter in the remote Badlands National Park of South Dakota, about as far as one could get from a schoolhouse. Yet throughout this surreal Midwestern moonscape of rainbow rock formations, I repeatedly ran into families with school-age children. Why weren't they in class? This was a question that my family got a lot. Why aren't they in school? Because we homeschool, and because this is what we do during the day. We go shopping, we go to the grocery store when there are fewer people around. In fact, that was part of our home ec. When I was organizing lunch and then eventually dinner, I would go to the store with my mother and help find those ingredients at the store. It's a huge deal. My mom showed me how to shop. She showed me what to look for. My mom always tried, well, we had 6 kids and a single income, so we were always looking for the least expensive option. So that was a very important part of our homeschooling. That's why we were in the store in midday. While many of the world's children are back to their old routines, and many parents are horrified at the idea of ever having to teach them at home again, an estimated 3.7 million U.S. households are homeschooling children. The proportion of homeschooled children in the U.S. nearly doubled from 2.8% before the pandemic to 5.4% in 2020 to 2021, according to the U.S. Department of Education. These do not represent the traditional cliche of homeschoolers, white families in conservative states who sometimes avoid mainstream education for religious reasons. Some 41% of homeschooled children are non-white, even before the pandemic, according to the 2019 DOE report. That is significantly larger than the fraction of the country that these demographics represent. Then after the pandemic began, homeschooling increased more among African Americans than among whites. This is very interesting. Follow me here. COVID was the publicist for homeschooling, says Khadija Ali Coleman, co-founder of Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars. Her 11-year-old brother was homeschooled for a few years because her mother feared he'd get bullied, and she periodically home-taught her own daughter, now 19. Ali Coleman says many Black families homeschooled for religious reasons before the pandemic, but during COVID shutdowns, they had a ringside seat in their children's lessons, and many didn't like the way the teachers talked to their kids. Fair point. Given what we just read about in that previous article, that does not surprise me. Racism in schools is now a big factor motivating many Black parents, she adds, noting that it can take many forms, from excluding the role of African Americans in U.S. history to attitudes toward clothing or behavior. And that's a very interesting take, given how much critical theory is taught to these kids through every grade. Among homeschooling parents of all races, 80% said they were motivated by fears about the school environment, from safety, including school shootings, to drugs and negative peer pressure. Nearly 60% wanted to provide religious instruction, and 3/4 weren't happy with what the schools offered. Many are concerned that their child will become different from them if they attend a traditional school, says Paul Peterson, director of Harvard's program on education policy and governance. He notes that a recent focus on teaching gender topics could sustain the newfound popularity of U.S. homeschooling, and that's exactly what we were looking at in that last article as well. Like so many other unintended consequences of the pandemic, homeschooling was given a boost by COVID, but will it endure? The DOE has no post-pandemic figures yet. Peterson surveyed parents in spring 2022 and found there had been no sign of abatement from pandemic highs, which he puts at 6% of the school-age population. Wow, that's significant. Even this could be an underestimate, he says. Where kids go to school is very badly measured in the U.S., and homeschooled children are likely undercounted. My home state of Illinois doesn't require homeschooling families to register. My birth state of Michigan says they don't count homeschool student numbers, and many states exercise no oversight of such students. Peterson says DOE questionnaires may be returned at lower rates by homeschooling families who are already suspicious of the government. Good. Whatever the true numbers, this isn't Little House on the Prairie version of homeschooling where parents make it up as they go along and students are ensconced in the home. If nothing else, the pandemic demonstrates the smorgasbord of options modern homeschooling parents have to choose from, including sophisticated online curricula, cooperatives, and small neighborhood study groups or pods. This is hopefully what Andy and I will end up doing. Not to mention trips to the Badlands for science lessons. COVID may have upended American schooling, but for some, that change now means a new way of learning. I think this is fantastic. So Ben over my chat is saying, I love that I was homeschooled, and I 100% agree. At the time, I thought it was really lonely. I felt like I wasn't being socialized enough, but now I'm like, okay, I was never abused. I was never exposed to these heinous ideas. I was able to just look at them from a distance, and I'm so glad. Looking at the rest of my peers now who are all incredibly unhappy, isolated, they're not in happy relationships, they've drifted far away from any kind of religious faith, makes me really, really grateful for the way that I was raised. So we will leave it at that. That's such a nice note to end on. This lady wrote a pretty nice piece about homeschooling. Good for her. Let me see what you guys are thinking real quick, and then we will discuss Ukraine and whether the U.S. is up to making sure that they follow through on all the money they've been thrown at. Just be you, and you'll probably become a lot more comfortable with yourself by the time you're in your 20s, says Andy, 100%. Fear me, it's Bree, says Winky Face. Cliff the Alien says these people haven't left school since they were in school. Yes, a lot of teachers just stayed in school for their entire life. There's no need to start taking chemicals and cutting up your body. Okay, this is what Andy started with for sure. For sure. Andy mentioned that for our earlier music, hope you are all enjoying Nightmirror, Nitemirror, and he gave a link, maximalismrecords.com. Wonderful, wonderful opening music that we always enjoy. I'm going to mix it up here soon. We're going to introduce some Akira the Dawn music, and that's going to be a lot of fun too. Enjoy that for sure. Great for working out. Let's see. Kevin Parsinger is asking about my music taste. He says, where does Tom McDonald fall on that school scale? I really liked Tom McDonald's early stuff. Haven't heard any of his later stuff. Cliff says, still waiting on Schiff's bombshell witness. Yes, remember when he had this manila envelope that was just going to be the end of everything, and he never opened it, and we all knew there was nothing in it? This guy is just a freaking liar, 100%. Andy? We shouldn't be giving any country our money. I'm inclined to agree, and we are going to talk about Ukraine for sure. Fang. Oh, yes. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Kevin says F public schools. Fong is a CCP vampire. Yeah. Nightmare. Yay. Nightmare is here. Awesome. If you listen to Nightmare while looking at yourself in the mirror with the lights turned off, Nightmare will show up in the chat. Hey, look at that. That's exactly what happened. Somebody was doing it. Username 142 says teachers need a dress code as much as students do. 100%. I don't know why these people are allowed to dress the way that they dress. This is not professional in any metric of the word, and I don't like it. Oh, I meant to talk about the Missouri ladies' dress code for their legislature there, because they said that the women couldn't expose their shoulders and everyone was losing their minds. And I'm just like, guys could never expose their shoulders or shins. Why should women be allowed to? Like, literally, are we actually looking for equality or not? Because women seem to have some special preferences. Yes, Mrs. Garrison, glorious. Tom Scott did a video about 3D printed copies to do surgery for practice. YouTube. Oh, cool beans. That's super cool. Yeah, separating conjoined twins is a crazy, crazy thing. That's some of the most extreme surgery you could look at. I'm sure that you could watch it, but I don't even think that watching a surgery would be enough unless they were laparoscopically showing you, like, with a little camera exactly what they were doing. So I was lucky enough to be able to sit in on an ACL revision, a young athlete who had an ACL surgery in the past that needed to be reworked. So they were doing it, and they had one of the salespeople for one of these companies that makes this hardware right there in the operating room with them, which was something that I was not expecting, because he went in and he showed the doctor how this piece of equipment worked. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, did they have one of those guys in the operating room when I had my shoulder surgery? Because I'm sure there's all kinds of funky hardware in there too. And they did certainly go in with a little camera laparoscopically, because they made tiny incisions. If you want to make a really minimally invasive surgery, what you're going to do is cut a tiny incision and put a camera in there so you can kind of look around and see where you're at, and that has a little bit of light attached to it so you can see what's going on in there. But yeah, really cool stuff. I really liked the surgical side of things, and I really enjoyed my schooling in what was functionally prerequisites for nursing schools. But I was considering doing OR tech before I came over to the dark side and started reading the news and talking about all the philosophy and the stuff that I care about. Let's see, Bree says, I wasn't only in a class with people my own age, I was as comfortable talking to adults and elderly people as my 11-year-old friends. I shocked so many adults with it. Yeah, for sure. That's why a lot of our socialization was at church. And I wished that my parents had involved me more in those conversations, but I really respected that we had a wide range of different age peoples to talk to. Red Bike Master says, the walls are closing in, Lids. Yes, they are. Bree says, look into a HSLDA membership for legal defense. If the state tries to mess with your right to homeschooling, they take care of the legal issues. That's correct. HSLDA was an organization that my family was involved in, and my mom was not paranoid looking back on it, but she was always mildly concerned that the state was going to try to interfere with us as her children, because she thought that homeschooling was distinctly frowned upon. Now, I don't think that it was in the 80s and early 2000s as such, but it was definitely necessary to be paying attention to all this stuff. A Red Bake Master says, I did a bunch of woodworking growing up. I was sick of it by my early adulthood, but I'm feeling the pull of it at nearly 30 now. For sure, yeah, if you have a hobby like that, you should definitely get into it. You can listen to music, podcasts, books on tape while you work on that too, for sure. All right, guys, the U.S. is threatening some form of accountability for Ukraine, so let's see how we're doing with our own accountability. Ukraine corruption scandal. Oh my gosh. U.S. promises rigorous monitoring of aid. Dun, dun, dun. I don't believe them for 1 minute. Not at all. In fact, let me go back. No, I can't go back. Okay. So the article that I drew this from actually said that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in that entire region, only slightly above Russia, because they're rooted in the same oligarchical USSR-style government. So, yeah, let's read about this. The U.S. vowed to tightly monitor how Ukraine spends billions of dollars of aid on Tuesday, following a damaging corruption scandal that led to a string of resignations in Kyiv. While Washington said it had no evidence Western funds were being misused, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price promised there would be a rigorous monitoring to ensure American assistance was not diverted. Okay. Several senior Ukrainian officials were dismissed on Tuesday in the wake of a corruption scandal surrounding illicit payments to deputy ministers and overinflated military contracts. Wow, super shocked Pikachu FaceTime. Who would have thought that Ukraine would be incredibly corrupt after what it did with Joe Biden and Burisma and Hunter Biden and Viktor Shokin and all of this stuff in the past. We knew about this stuff before we pumped billions of dollars into them, and we chose to do it anyway. And lots of people were saying that this is just money laundering for the Democratic Party, and I'm inclined to agree, because I will show you why I think that. The Pentagon can't account for $220 billion in government property. They failed their 5th audit. That's great. Really glad that we're going to be holding Ukraine accountable, because we are so non-corrupt ourselves. A Tuesday report by the Government Accountability Office revealed that the Department of Defense failed its 5th audit in a row after it could not account for at least $220 billion in government furnished property. The DoD has been mandated by federal law to complete audits since 1994. However, the mandate was ignored for decades due to the agency's massive size, according to military.com. Since its launching its first independent audit in 2017, the Pentagon has never passed. So what position are we in to hold one of the world's most corrupt countries accountable? I don't think we're in any position. We are the definition of the pot calling the kettle black. Holy cow. DoD's lack of accountability over government property in the possession of contractors has been reported by auditors for decades. The longstanding issue affects the accounting and reporting of GFP and is one of the reasons DoD is unable to produce auditable financial statements. How do they get away with this? You know they'll put you in jail over your taxes, right? Never mind that IRS agents don't even pay their own taxes and the IRS doesn't even punish them. It's so frustrating to see the two-tiered justice system in effect, isn't it? Especially when you know that if, for example, you send $600 by Venmo or whatever, they're going to be asking you for an account of that. But they can just lose $220 billion of federal funds, aka taxpayer money, that they either took from you, which is bad, or just printed, which is worse. So this is a really exciting story. I'm loving it. Yeah, so I don't think that we should be enforcing accountability for Ukraine. I think that another country should be doing that. I think that the least corrupt country in the world should probably be doing that. And I'm not entirely sure who that would be. I would say maybe the UK, possibly France. I know they have their own issues. Maybe Switzerland. I know some of these other countries like Luxembourg are notoriously shady and pretty much all, you know what? You know who's really, really good and who has almost zero national debt is Estonia, because they remember what it was like under the USSR and they have no desire to go back to communism. So they pay in heavily to NATO. They actually contribute as much as they're supposed to, which good for them. Bet you a nickel they can keep track of all their stuff, whereas we can't. Admittedly, Estonia is much smaller, but anyway, we also know that the U.S. just gave a bunch of Abrams tanks to Ukraine, and now Ukraine wants fighter jets. It will never end. We will keep caving it to them until we are facing down nuclear war. I'm convinced, because as Ben Shapiro constantly harps, there has to be an off-ramp. There has to be some kind of compromise from our side. And then Russia can kind of have the opportunity to come to the table. Because it's a little bit like a married relationship where you go into it and you're convinced that you're right and you're going to get what you want. And then you start talking to your partner and you're like, oh my gosh, if I don't cave a little bit on a few things, we're going to be stuck forever and we're never going to solve this problem. And because you actually want to achieve peace, which I don't believe the U.S. wants to do with Ukraine. I don't know what the U.S. wants in Ukraine. I only know the U.S. does not care to give Russia any kind of off-ramp to de-escalate. If they did, they would have done so by now. I'm starting to think we're just going to be fighting forever. Really, really frustrating. Oh, look at this article. Corruption in Ukraine. Is time running out for Zelensky to reform the country? Anytime there's a question in the headline, the answer is yes. And I would say that in this instance, the answer is certainly yes. It is running out of time to reform the country. Yeah, hey, look at that. Ukraine's central bank chief quits over systematic political pressure. That's so crazy. Imagine corruption in Ukraine. I could never imagine that. Anyway, we're not the right people to do it. We do not have a leg to stand on. When we point at Ukraine, there are four fingers pointing back at us. But everything we've done lately has been totally crazy, totally unethical, and completely incompetent. So let's look at the most recent expert appointed by Biden to see what she has to say about obesity. Controversial expert is appointed to Biden food panel after claiming that obesity can't be treated with exercise and good diet because it's genetic. Will now tell Americans what to eat. This is so great. I am a little bit black-pilled about this because I have seen the state of the American health, like the American nutrition system. Have you guys seen the food pyramid lately? Ben Shapiro was talking a little bit about this earlier today. He was like, well, if you look at the food pyramid, you've got all the grains on the bottom, because it was like all these farmers were growing grain, and they were like, hey, how can we tell people that this is the right thing for them to eat? Let's go to the government and convince them to make a governmental guidance to encourage people to eat this. What actually happened was that people like corn farmers got a bunch of subsidies to grow corn, which is now why we feed corn to cows and why corn syrup isn't everything. Isn't that delightful? So they subsidized, and then they lobbied, and then they came out with the food pyramid, and now this is what we eat, and this is why we are literally dying of obesity. Truly delightful stuff. But let's read what this lady has to say. A member of the Biden administration panel set to determine new dietary guidelines for Americans is receiving backlash for her comments on obesity. Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford, an obesity medicine physician at Mass General Health in Boston, was appointed in 2025 Dietary Guideline Advisory Committee, which will develop new recommended eating habits for Americans over the coming years. Cool. So she doesn't believe that you can control your weight with diet. So how is she going to tell you to eat? Is it going to be correct? Is it going to be based in objective science? Probably not. The only way to keep her from getting into this position is to make sure a Republican wins the presidency and can break this up going into 2025. The appointment has received backlash as it comes only weeks after she downplayed the value of diet and exercise and weight loss in an interview with 60 Minutes at the start of the year. The Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and Agriculture, USDA, develop these guidelines every 5 years. Previous versions have been blamed for jumpstarting America's obesity crisis. Yeah, because this is the food pyramid. All of the bread, rice, cereal, and pasta is at the bottom. You're supposed to eat the most of this food group, and then you have vegetables. Only then do you have meat. Only at the very, very top do you actually have the things that will keep you full, which are fats. So proteins and fats are at the top, along with cheeses. So everything that's actually better to eat than the stuff on the bottom is at the very tippy top of the pyramid, because they don't want you to eat as much, because this is what's subsidized, and these are the people who have lobbied the government to make sure that this stays down here, not up here. Oy. Dr. Cody's appointment comes that the U.S. remains one of the fattest countries in the world, according to a new report. We don't even need a new report to tell us that. We've been one of the world's fattest countries for decades now, if I recall correctly. The number one cause of obesity is genetics, Dr. Cody said. That means if you're born to parents that have obesity, you have a 50 to 85% likelihood of having the disease yourself. It's not a disease. It is mental. It is affected by what's in your food, and it's affected by what's in your hormones and your activity level. It is not a disease. She says even with optimal diet, exercise, sleep management, stress management. So she's discounting everything. Basically, her message here is that it doesn't matter what you do. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Nothing you take responsibility for will make a difference. Now, what we opened our show with yesterday fully disproves this, because that guy was 26, 27 years old. He was heavily drinking every single day. He was obese by a measure of something like 200 pounds. He stopped drinking, immediately lost a bunch of weight. So that wasn't genetic. And then he hit the gym really, really, really hard, and he was inspired by David Goggins, and he lost the rest of it. Was that genetic, or was it the fact that he was an alcoholic and he ate like crazy, likely when he drank? When I found that when I would drink, my ability to resist temptations would fall significantly as well. And I'm willing to bet that's exactly what happened for him. That's not genetic. That's just what you put into your body having an effect on how your body looks and behaves and how full it is of fat. My goodness, this is infuriating. Nutritionists and dietitians around America are also likely to make recommendations to parents based on the decisions made by this panel. Not cool. Not cool. I can only hope that by that time, literally no one in the United States of America gives any form of credence to any of these ridiculous people who work for the state. It is recommended 6 to 11 servings of starchy foods like rice and bread each day. Can you imagine eating 11 servings of bread a day? That's toast for breakfast, that's cereal for breakfast, that's oatmeal for breakfast. Then for lunch, that's a sandwich, that's pizza, that's all kinds of pasta. That's insane. That's not even taking into account the levels of calories that each of these food items brings. And one of the things that I found when I was trying to lose weight was that carbs like this left you feeling hungry pretty much immediately, because we know, this has been proven, what happens when you eat something like a refined starch like bread is that it spikes your blood sugar and then your blood sugar crashes, which means that you're hungrier sooner even after you've eaten the exact same number of calories. This is blowing my mind. This is, after all, the food pyramid that we already have in place. They say 2 to 3 servings of fruit, 3 to 5 servings of vegetables, 2 to 3 of meat and dairy, sparing use of fats, oils, and sweets. Sparing use of sweets for sure, probably sparing use of oils, absolutely. Dairy fat is good for you. Animal fat is not proven to be bad for you either. You can be as cautious or as incautious as you want to be with that. But the fact of the matter is that we are not eating as we should. In fact, the New York Post, food you shouldn't eat, just came out with an article about how bad foods like cheese and chocolate could actually be good for you. This is something that I knew in my early 20s because I'd done a modicum of research about it because I was heavier than I wanted to be and I wanted to lose weight. So what I found was that cheese and eggs, and yes, peanut butter, are going to keep you full for longer, much longer than a piece of bread will. You eat 150 calories of bread, which is approximately 2 pieces depending on the bread, and then you eat a scoop of peanut butter and you see which one keeps you fuller for longer. I recommend eating them separately and eating them on the similar kind of day with similar levels of activity. Peanut butter, full of fat and protein, 100% will keep you fuller for longer than bread. Same goes for butter, same goes for cheese and eggs. Chocolate is good if it's dark. They also mention white potatoes, which I don't really know anything about. I did not eat a lot of potatoes when I was working on losing weight. I view them kind of as pasta, although they are technically a vegetable. I finally just came up with the idea that anything that was like white was really not good for you. Although now that I think about it, there are certainly white cheeses and there are white parts of eggs. So that doesn't really stand. But it's a good rule of thumb to not eat anything white. Like you have ice cream, you have bread, you have rice, you have all that other stuff you should probably just avoid. I only see the state of the American health, the general state of American health going downhill with somebody like this at the helm. This is total nonsense. You can't just tell people that nothing they do will make any difference. It's all down to their genetics. That's just so discouraging. Isn't it much more encouraging to realize that there's actually something that you can do instead of just being like, oh, well, I guess it's just your parents. But no, that's not the case at all. Do not believe this woman. Don't listen to her. Let's read what you guys are saying. Odessa was the organized crime capital of the USSR. Yeah, my best friend at community college was 50. I hung out with them instead of people my age. Yep, good idea. Government employees are laughably dumb. This is coming from someone who has worked in government. Yeah. Is that the new Apple shelving system? I'm not sure what you're referring to. When I was 18, one of my good friends was 54. She was a regular where I worked and just an all-around awesome lady. Yes, I have also always had friends who are older than I am for the most part. Right now I have friends who are in their mid-30s, early 40s, and I think that's just about the sweet spot because those people have a little more experience than I do, so I'm kind of looking to them for wisdom, kind of asking them what I should be expecting as, I turn 32, 33, and then get on into my mid-30s. And then I think that that's probably the best way to choose your friends is on the merits of what they've experienced, what they've been through. Keenan says, bet you a Buffalo nickel, US deal with Germany, Belgium deal with Iraq. Interesting. Well, I did see that Russia is making deals with Afghanistan for American military equipment. I don't know if you recall the manner in which we withdrew from Afghanistan, but man, I do not blame Russia at all for getting in on that sweet, sweet American military deal. Anyway, it'll end in World War III. Always check out the third in command. They are power brokers and will lead you in the right direction. Ukraine is corrupt to the core. The West doesn't need them. Well, the West doesn't need themselves, apparently, because we can't even keep track of our own money. My prediction, the war will be prolonged long enough that you will see both sides using American weapons. Oh, okay. That would make sense. Zach says 70% of all the money, weapons, and supplies given to Ukraine get stolen and sold on the black market. Europe is being flooded with rifles coming from Ukraine. That is not surprising. Yep, Cliff is giving me the laugh emoji and says, just eat Lucky Charms, gotta get back in shape. Yes, Joe Rogan actually posted this chart that they put together, and then I'm going to wrap it up here because I need to get out before 7. But they made a chart of the healthier foods, and you know what was higher than meat and eggs? Was Lucky Charms. Absolutely insane to me. They said that Lucky Charms were healthier for you than whole foods like eggs. My mind was blown. If obesity can't be fixed with a healthy diet and exercise, what about all the people who lost weight doing those things? Well, apparently you don't need the evidence from data and statistics and whatnot. You don't actually need numbers for science, it turns out. That's crazy. Pushing drugs on kids to lose weight is their goal. 100%. 100%. In fact, I'm not going to be able to read much about this guy tonight, but I wanted to mention this. A miracle obesity cure or a dangerous TikTok trend adored by Hollywood. As the likes of Elon Musk, Jeremy Clarkson, and Chelsea Handler spark the craze for a slimming jab, it's called Ozempic. Experts warn Ozempic's obvious weight loss benefit might not outweigh the risks. So this is pretty much exactly what they're doing. When they're telling you that it's genetic, they're giving you the understanding that you have to use their medicine to make a positive change for your health. And we know that that's never the case. Are you kidding? You can't even take Tylenol without being in fear of the side effects. God only knows what birth control has done to women. And you look at stuff like antidepressants. The other thing I was going to read tonight, let me show you guys. This is the latest thing. Let me close this. Too many buttons. New study finds some antidepressants may cause emotional blunting. So antidepressants are supposed to keep you from going too low. But what they're finding is that a lot of antidepressants also keep you from going high. So you're not going to feel super happy either. It's true you're not going to feel sad, but you're also not going to feel good, which is not the way to experience human expression. You know, it's not the way to go through the human experience. It really isn't. So I came off antidepressants because I believe that I was situationally depressed, and now moving forward into like trying to develop a family, I was like, I'm not going to make my child withdraw from antidepressants after they're born. That's not fair to do. I want them to be healthy and have every possible leg up as they come into the world. So if you have a chance to get off antidepressants, if you can do so safely, you should look at that. Because it gives you the opportunity to feel both good and bad. And then what I'm trying to do right now is learn to handle those low moments, those low feelings and bad moods. And you can do that really, really well with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that you control. So you do control your destiny. Don't listen to this crazy lady who's going to be working in the government. Don't listen to the people who tell you have to take an antidepressant or you have to take a weight loss med. You control your fate much more than you realize. Your feelings are not the truth. They're just feelings. Even if you feel very down on yourself and very bad about things and very discouraged about your outlook, you have control. You can actually change that. If you go through and you look at it with a magnifying glass and you say, okay, am I maybe fortune telling? Am I guessing what's going to happen? Am I putting thoughts into other people's minds that aren't really there? You start to realize that your feelings are maybe not a reflection of reality, which is very valuable when it comes to tackling stuff like depression, for sure. And he says, I assumed it had to do with science at the time. Yes, no, it doesn't. Bree says, notice the stuff at the bottom is also the cheapest and easiest to manufacture. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because it's subsidized, right? So these are the people who got subsidies to raise those crops, and then they lobby the government to make sure that these things were always cheap. And part of the way they did that was by putting it on the bottom of the food pyramid and making sure that people thought that it was very important to eat all that stuff. If your parents are obese, you'll probably be too because they're teaching you poor eating and health habits. Exactly. I've actually heard things about the sperm of obese fathers too. That's considered epigenetics, I believe. But it makes sense to me that it would influence your kid's potential for being obese. However, potential is not destiny. Potential can be stopped and changed. And just because you have to pay attention to what you eat doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be obese all the time. Even if you have that tendency in your family, even if you have the genetics, it just means that you're going to need to be more aware about what you eat than other people are. Andy says, why would adults just make up lies about what it's healthy to eat? Because they want to sell weight loss drugs, because they're trying to sell these subsidized foods, etc., etc. Yeah, the whole government cheese thing. Because they grew up at a McDonald's, as I get McDonald's for dinner. How dare you, Brie? Are these people even human anymore? I don't know, man. It just seems to me like they are enthralled to the people who write their paychecks, and it's just not good. It's not good. It's unethical. This is capitalism unmoored from ethics. When I was pregnant with number 1, I gained 14 pounds in 4 weeks because all I could eat was McDonald's fries for a month. Oh my goodness. Doctors told me I was too fat, too fast, and to stop. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Yes. Lori says, yes, I had to cut out sugar too. Yep, sugar gets me so bad for sure. Sugar is a serious temptation. I find that when I'm hungry for things, and I'm going to wrap it up here, I always want like a steak. I really always want something kind of salty or cheese or whatever. All of this stuff that technically, theoretically is supposed to be super bad for you. But in my experience, that's really what keeps me full for longest. And it means that I have to eat fewer calories than I would otherwise. Don't drink your sugar calories, by the way, guys. That's a great way to get too many. All right, guys, I'm going to go to our wedding group. I will see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. And until then, bye, guys. How's it going?